Hi everyone, it's Gene, and today I want to talk about the Odyssey. The Odyssey is a very interesting book because a lot of people think that like the stories and a lot of stuff came out of the Odyssey, right? Like even if you haven't heard of like even if you haven't read the Odyssey, like you've probably heard of Odysseus or some of the characters in the book. Even if you haven't, like if you look at like Western culture, you see a lot of like Grecian elements, right? Like for example, a lot of like if you go to like the capital of the US or Washington DC, you see like a lot of like columns, right? Those columns are like resemble those of like a temple in Athena in Athens, for example, not Athena, my bad. But and the reason that happened is because, well, Greece plays an enormous role in like ancient Greece played an enormous role in like Western civilization and culture and history, and therefore those elements are still embedded in our world today. So like for example, like I think that a lot of people think that ancient Greece is ancient Greece, but when we look at the world again, we see so many elements of things that might have been described in the Odyssey or the Iliad or some other famous like play or like story written thousands of years ago. And so I think that it is really important to look at these books, first of all because they're very interesting, and second of all because it kind of lets like some of us go back to like the roots of like the cultures that we might live in, we might like experience, like or like we might just like like be around. For example, like Western civilization and its love of Greece, right? Now I think that it's very interesting because like the Odyssey has like a bunch of themes that I don't know, like maybe it's just because like these themes are like universally like good themes that like it's like a coincidence that they appeared in later books, or it might be that people were inspired by the Odyssey, or it could just be that the Odyssey did not play like that much of an important role, which I don't think is true, but like who knows, right? Like while the Odyssey is supposed to have played an enormous role, perhaps it's famous, but it hasn't really played that much of a big role. All of those things are possible. Honestly, I think that the last option isn't that possible. But the point is that at the end of the day, there's a lot of themes that in the Odyssey that recur in like modern culture and modern literature. Now, one of the main themes that we can see is this theme of like things like if something goes bad, the end result is gonna be good, right? Like we're gonna get to a result that's good. Like we're gonna have like the solution, the like the fate that the gods have drawn out for you. It's gonna be fine, right? Like for example, Odysseus, he was stranded on an island for like 7 years or like 10 years, but like at the end of the day, he survived. He came back home. He killed the suitors. He got back his palace. Everything was fine, right? He lived happily ever after. And the suitors got what they needed, right? They were stealing, they were rude, they were just harassing people. They were all killed, which might be, like, I don't know, like, maybe that's kind of too severe of a punishment, but at the end of the day, like, like, the basic theme is that justice has been delivered, right? And then there's also, like, several, and like, overall, it seems like the gods make sure that things go well. And I think that this is like something that I cannot emphasize more. Athena goes down and she makes sure that Telemachus and Odysseus and all of them, they can just do whatever they want, right? She makes them invisible, right? She gives them plans and clues, and she helps them throughout their journey, and like she's honestly just like an amazing goddess, right? And when we look at this, and like Athena's like Zeus, can I do XYZ, right? And like when we look at this, it seems like the gods know what's going to happen and are just guiding these players towards that ultimate fate. And I think that that is very interesting because It offers like people a different view of what's going to happen than like what people normally think, right? And so like I think that most of us think like, okay, if I do something here, that is gonna impact my like everything's gonna change, right? Like for example, like let's say that like competition, like an athletic competition, and let's say that you're running track and like somebody's right next to you and you're just like neck to neck, right? At that point, you're really just spurred on by the fact that, oh my gosh, I have to win this. I have to go just a bit faster because if I don't, I won't win. But what the ancient Grecians seem to have thought, or at least what Homer thought, or at least what he wrote down in the Odyssey, is that that's not true. Like, everything is already kind of predetermined for you. They already know the future. You're just a player in that story, and they're just trying to make sure that the story is fair and is filled with justice, right? In other words, these gods, if they want, they can just be like, okay, they can just use their powers to do whatever they want, but instead they're gonna let you just play out the story. But at the end of the day, they're gonna get the result that they want to get. Now, I'm not in normal life, we don't really think that there are gods who, you know, make sure that give us plans, make us invisible, who make sure that we look like we're powerful, or that we look like we're disguised. And you know, I don't think that a lot of us like still believe in a lot of those things. You know, with the rise of modern culture, like lots of even before the rise of modern culture, like hundreds of years ago, Grecian mythology and that kind of idea about fate was kind of left behind in the dust as people began to realize there are like no gods, and there are like no there's no Zeus, and there's no Athena, and there's no like Medusa, right? And so it kind of was left in the dust, but now that we can examine this, I think that the Odyssey is just like a great like way to look at it, because like there's so many examples of fate being decided for the person, which raises the question, like, is this a recurrent theme in the world? Like, sure, many people have left it behind, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like it isn't a recurrent theme in the world, right? For example, lots of people think that evil is bad, and today law enforcement and like justice systems are much better than they were like a few hundred years ago. That doesn't mean that like evil has stopped, right? In fact, some can argue that it got even worse because now there's more globalization, and they can use like other sources or platforms like online platforms, right? Like in social media. And so people can argue that things have gotten worse, even though the general consensus of the world has been that we should be stopping crime, we should be more harsh on crime, we should have law enforcement and courts and justice. At least that's what's happened in most of the world, right? And so again, for this, I think that if we look at it, we can really see this fate idea or argument displayed in a lot of different stories. First of all, there's always like lots of the time we're going to see like how, oh, it was fated to be this. And at the end of the day, I think like if we look at a lot of movies or books, or if we read books, or if we watch like if we watch any type of like story, or read it the story, or listen to it, lots of the time people turn out to be incredibly lucky. Like, you might not think about it a lot, but there's a lot of the time, character A meets character B just at the right time. Lots of the time, like, the right thing happens, right? Like, for example, like, I think there's, like, so many examples of this, and it's, like, kind of stunning, because it's, like, if things had just been, like, slightly, like, 1% different, then this movie probably would not have ended in the way that it would have ended. Like, most of the time, and I urge you to, like, think about this as you're reading a book. I can't, like, think of any examples, but, like, most of the time, I think that there's, like, lots of times when things just happen by pure luck, not because of, like, say, skill. For example, let's say that a criminal is coming towards you, and this is like a classic cliche. Like somebody is coming towards you and you're hiding behind, say, like a stack of like boxes or cans or whatever. Well, they're probably gonna be like one step away from you, right? Probably talking to their henchmen or whatever. And then, like, you're really nervous because they might be able to spot you, but just before they get to you, they decide that they're gonna stop, right? Like, the chance that that happens is incredibly small. Now, you might think that's luck and not fate, but at the end of the day, the prevalence of this is shocking. I've, like, thought about this a bit, and I've realized that when we look at the world, like, there's so many, like, examples of luck and, like, at least in books, right? And so I think that this might be a recurring theme of how, like people who deserve to live, or maybe people who don't deserve to live, but still somehow ended up being saved by fate. They're just saved by fate. It's not luck, but it's something else. It's something that it's something else, right? There's also a few other examples that I want to delve into, and I think that it's also like the fact that lots of people want there to be fate, like, right? Because if they're just left on their own, it's kind of scary. We're autonomous beings, which might seem like a great thing, but then we realize that that means that there's nobody to protect us or to guard us, right? I think that, like, in ancient times, the fact that, like, the gods were there was really comforting to all these people, because that meant that there was somebody to watch over them. The moment that, let's say, like if they didn't believe in, like, you know, Grecian mythology and the ancient gods, that meant that they would be autonomous beings, right, to them, and that would mean that would be a kind of scary world, right? And I think that's also why there's, like, concepts of, like, heaven and, like, you know, hell, because it's really just a great, like, it's just like the ultimate, like, ending of fate, right? Like, for example, whether you look at, like, almost any religion, you're gonna see those too, right? For example, in ancient Greece, there's always this, like, place where, like all the normal people would go to, like, this place where you, like, just drift around. But then if you did a great thing, you would go to, like, this amazing neighborhood. Like, just imagine, like, the best neighborhood, like, you know, in, like, a really, like, an expensive area, right? Like, I don't know, in Los Angeles or New York, and then of course there's hell, and then hell is just, like, really bad, right? And so, like, I think that that's also a concept that's really comforting to people. And, you know, it's kind of easy to understand why we want people to get what they deserve. And so I think that the Odyssey is not only talking about fate, but as a broader theme, it's also talking about justice. Because fate and justice are really intertwined, right? Sometimes fate goes along with justice, sometimes it doesn't. And as we, like, go through all of these things, like, I think that, like, the Odyssey is exploring two main things. First, how these stories end, how these stories are meant to end, or fate. And second, whether or not this was justice, whether or not this was justifiable, and whether or not, like, the criminals and villains have paid, and whether or not the people who were wronged were, were, like, reimbursed, or at least, like, saved from their misery. And I think that's just, like, the Odyssey. So the next time that you pick up a book, or the next time that you read or, like, watch a movie or see a TV show, just remember that, like, it is very, very possible that the themes of the Odyssey, which are enormously important themes, right? And I think that a lot of people think, like, oh, this was a book written, like, 2,500 years ago or something like that. And sure, it has lots of themes, but at the end of the day, it's just a story about this guy who just goes on this, like, 10-year-long adventure. I don't think that this is going to be reflected in, say, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, right? But who knows? As you're watching it, perhaps think about those themes, which I think occur so much in, like, literature. And the reason that I said, like, Western literature a lot is, like, mostly because, like, lots of the books that become, like, really famous, and I think this is, like, kind of an example of, like, imperialism, but, like, because of the fact that Britain ruled most of the world for, like, I don't know, a long time, right? Like, in the 1800s, that's why English is so, like, common. It's not because English is, like, a better language or anything like that. It's because English is, like, so widespread because Britain, like, was controlling so many parts of the world, right? And so I think that it's, like, kind of an example of imperialism, but because of that, you know, for better or for worse, I think it's kind of for worse. But at the end of the day, we are left with, like, mostly, like, remnants of Western literature. And then in today's globalized world, it's kind of even hard to talk about Western or, like, Eastern literature. And so at this point, it's just kind of like literature in general. But that was just a side note, just to explain why I sometimes say Western literature, not just literature in general. But, you know, in general, I also think that this, like, these concepts are, like, good because, you know, again, the British Empire was very widespread. And today, in today's globalized world, like, stories and books and movies and TV shows, they're all shared across the world. I can buy, like, a movie and stream it, even if it was made in, say, like, Korea, right? And that means that globalization means that these themes are shared even more across the world, which can mean that the themes that we saw in the Odyssey might just come out in like the latest like comic book from whatever like comic book series that you're interested in. And so that's something like that's some food for thought. And yeah, that's today's like theme analysis of the Odyssey, those are two main themes I feel like really were emphasizing the Odyssey. And they might be some of the main themes as well, because at the end of the book, the Odyssey is just a book about setting things right. So hopefully you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!